Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Happy Monday, everybody. What's going on, Facebook and YouTube world? How's everybody doing this afternoon? Is everybody, I don't really like the phrase hanging in there. Is everybody choosing to soar? Is everybody choosing to stay inspired? Is everybody choosing and practicing staying prayed up, as many in the African American community would say, because we need to be prayed up. We need to rely on our source. Now, regardless of your religion or your spiritual philosophy, none of us made ourselves. So, whatever term or language you use to commune with that omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent force, some say God, some say supreme being, some say the universe, some say Allah, some say a lot of different names. It doesn't really care what we, as long as acknowledge its existence, its role, and ask for guidance, ask for wisdom, ask for direction. So this afternoon, well, I might as well say evening, I have a special guest that is going to be joining me. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is on the screen. I'm Shabaka Amin. And for the past 22 years now, I have been devoted to helping people achieve what I call biological wealth. And it's been a great, great journey. It's been a wonderful journey. I truly enjoy and love what I do, very passionate about seeing people achieve health success. I enjoy inspiring people. I enjoy uplifting people. I enjoy teaching people. So helping people achieve what I call. Today, I have a guest that I will bring on shortly. So I want to welcome all of you who are on. Please leave a comment, say hello. Because it's a conversation / interview, I won't be able to respond to any comments until after the broadcast. However, if you are on live right now, I'm going to ask a favor of you. And I believe you're going to share this broadcast. Please share this with friends on Facebook. I'm going to ask everyone watching now, share this broadcast, because this broadcast is all about helping people achieve health success. And today, the focus is on African Americans achieving health success. And there is a really, really powerful movement underway whereby there's a public health demonstration encouraging all African Americans to adopt a plant-based eating style for an entire day as a step towards health success and a stand against food slavery. And what I'm referring to is the upcoming Plant-Based Day Pledge. So that's my opening. Again, it's Shabaka Amin. Thanks for joining me live right now, live and direct on the Plant-Based Loser platform. Let me go ahead and introduce my guests. Please go ahead and share this live with others. Okay, my guest today, his name is Dr. Philippe Zamor. He is a transplant hepatologist and excuse me, let me say that again. He is a transplant hepatologist and a gastroenterologist with Atrium Health here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm going to invite Dr. Zamor on live. Dr. Zamor, welcome to the Plant-Based Loser platform.
Thank you, Shabaka. Good evening to you and all your viewers.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to have you here. In my own will, I've been striving to get you on my platform for the longest time. You're a father, husband, busy medical doctor. And you know, what I'm learning more and more, Dr. Zamor, is everything happens in God's time.
Yes, sir. Yes, indeed. Amen to that.
Here we are, and it's the perfect time. I call it the God-appointed time. And
Yeah.
2020 has been a year, man.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness, man. When you think of major events this year that have rocked us to the core, from the passing and transition of Kobe Bryant and his daughter and all the other beautiful beings on that helicopter, that tragic Sunday, to now the coronavirus spread
Yes.
transmission.
Yes. Mind blowing. Mind blowing.
2020. This is, and here's what's interesting. Numbers have revelation, right? 2020 in numerology is what would be called a 4 universal year. Now, there is revelation in numbers. Numbers have patterns. They indicate patterns, and certain years have patterns, and the supreme being communicates through cycles. And 2020 is what they call a 4 universal year. And the 4 in numerology represents foundation, organization, and structure. It's about laying down foundations, laying down roots, laying down roots and principles, adhering to higher ways of doing things in terms of that are law-based, principle-based. And so, our conversation today is about African Americans. And the title, if you will, is really a question. And the question, which is the title, must African Americans adopt a plant-based eating style to create a new health story? And before we deep dive into that conversation, I want to first start off with a question for you, Dr. Zamor. I know that you are a hepatologist and a gastroenterologist. Would you describe for me and the audience what you do as a hepatologist and gastroenterologist?
Well, very simply put, I am a liver doctor, and liver disease is a subspecialty of gastroenterology, which is the study of the intestines, the stomach, the digestive system. So I think it's quite interesting, ironic, yet poignant that you're talking about diet and plant-based diet, and I'm a physician that studies the GI tract and the gastrointestinal tract. So every single thing that you eat or put in your body has a direct correlation to. So basically, you heard this before: you are what you eat. This goes back many, many decades. So that's basically what I do when I look at. Before I'm a specialist, though, I'm still board certified in internal medicine. That's where I began. I practiced that for 3 years before I did my training and specialty training. So I'm still an internist / primary care physician. So yes, I'm a specialist, but I also like to make sure I'm somewhat knowledgeable about some of the basic principles of internal medicine, preventative care, proactive care, preventing disease. So that's sort of the background of what I do. Regarding my specialty, we do a lot with liver disease, liver transplant, dealing with different disorders that affect the liver. So the liver is an organ that does many, many functions. It's a very complex and complicated organ. It is the fuel source for the body. It is the fuel storage. We break down sugars. We break down fats with the liver. It does many, many things. So that's just sort of a basic idea of what the liver does. It also helps to break down medications. So many medications go through either the liver or the kidneys to be processed by the body. So I'm seeing patients, again, that have some disorders that have been created by medications. And so again, we'll get back to that a little bit more later, but very simply, the less medications you need, the less you'll insult your liver. Quite simple. I'm a simple man. I live by simple principles, and I practice medicine by simple principles. Less is more, and more isn't necessarily better.
Amen to that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, I just, again, I'll just get it briefly into it. When I hear patients tell me, well, my diabetes is not under control, so they're putting me on more medications. They're doing this to me. They're putting me on more and more medications. Very gently and gingerly, I say, well, no, you're putting yourself on more medications. You're putting yourself on additional medications that are costly and that can affect the liver and other parts of our body. Remember, every single medication can have side effects. My goal is to get people off of medications. Pharmacists don't like me. I'm trying to put them all out of business. Is my goal.
That's right. And you know, it's funny. Speaking of simple principles,
Yes.
one of the primary, most unacknowledged yet most powerful understandings, if I can say, use the word principle with an understanding of the way things work. So many people eat as if or without any regard for the fact that they are occupying God's biology.
Yes.
The liver was made by God.
Yes.
The entire body, the human body, which I refer to as God's biology, was designed, made, and is still being operated by an omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent force. And I would say most of our ills, diseases, start from this attitude that I can eat whatever I want, eating by one's own will versus surrendering to what science has revealed. You know, science, nutritional science reveals what God has put on the planet Earth, what God has put that's beneficial on the planet Earth. The compounds in plant-based foods, the phytonutrients. You know, speaking of medications, I've done talks where I've said it's either going to be phytochemicals or pharmaceuticals.
Right.
You make the choice.
Or, if I may, with my addition of that is you can pay the farmer now or pay pharma later.
I love it.
Yes, sir.
I'm writing that down.
Please do.
I love that. And that is true.
Yes.
It's true because, you know, a farmer is like a shepherd of
Yes.
God's bountiful harvest. Everything in the plant kingdom, everything in the botanical kingdom has benefits for our biology. In fact, Big Pharma wouldn't be Big Pharma. There would be no pharmaceutical industry without the botanical kingdom, because the basis of chemistry comes from nature.
Yes.
And so by you saying either you pay the farmer or later you pay Big Pharma,
right,
is so true. It is very true. You know, I've always told people as a coach, nutrition performance coach, that you're going to spend money on your biology one way or another. It's either going to be for preventative or health success purposes, or by default, neglect and abuse. It's going to be in the form of prescription drugs, higher healthcare premiums, surgery, etc.
yes.
Then there's another cost called pain and suffering. And I'm thinking of Dick Gregory right now. You know,
yes.
Dick Gregory used to drop bombs of wisdom on us. He always would use the word violation.
Mm.
Violation. So the eating practices, the arrogance of saying or thinking that I can eat whatever I want is a violation of
Yes.
God's biology, and people are paying a heavy price. So what you do is basically diagnose as well as treat diseases associated with the liver. Liver, correct?
Correct. Correct.
So I want to ask you, as a physician who diagnoses and treats patients with liver diseases, what percentage of your patient base are African Americans?
Okay, very good. I probably should start off with saying at the beginning of our session that these views are, first off, my own views, and I don't speak on behalf of Atrium. I'm sure the lawyers in there somewhere would probably have me say that, but I'm just thinking ahead.
Goodness, great.
Yes, sir. I see probably between, on an average day, between 30 to 60% of my patients are African American or of African descent or Black descent, whether they be American or from Africa, actually.
30 to 60% of your
Yeah,
patients that you see on any given week are of African descent.
right.
So that's past 50%.
Yes,
For
sir. Yes.
so there is definitely, and then when you look at what African Americans account for 12.7% of the U.S. American population, right?
Right.
Now, on a national level, what's the data? What does the data say in terms of liver diseases, the incidences of liver diseases? What percentage of African Americans account for
Certain ones we're seeing in very, very high proportion in African Americans, particularly hepatitis B, hepatitis C, which are two bloodborne virus diseases that affect the liver. Other diseases, such as fatty liver disease, we're seeing now in rising proportion. We used to think that was a small number of patients. Well, I can tell you that we're seeing that number rising on a consistent basis, both from direct impact of fatty liver, primarily from obesity, or also seen in conjunction with diabetes. We used to say, "Oh, this usually happens only in my white patients and so forth," but quite frankly, we're seeing more and more African American patients with this condition. In addition, going back to what we said previously, I'm seeing patients more and more with liver damage from medications. And those medications, pardon me, these earbuds don't want to cooperate. The medications can be either prescribed by a physician or self-prescribed. They go out and buy weight loss, and we're seeing, I would say, a lot more of this in very concerning numbers of patients having liver issues, liver complications, liver abnormal liver enzymes from taking whatever, quote, supplements that people find. They fall under sort of a non-prescribed category, where patients go and take some over-the-counter supplements, or what they call herbal or dietary supplements, HDS. And we're seeing more and more of these patients coming in with issues related to this. And the big issue with that is these supplements are not regulated by the FDA. So,
and that's a very broad category when we say supplement.
over 80,000
right
are available,
right
and rising.
right. There's protein powders, and then there's herbal supplements, and then
Right.
there's mineral supplements, et cetera, et cetera, et
Right,
cetera.
right. And the problem is that we don't know, we're not mandated in this country to control exactly what goes in those supplements. So while you read a supplement, for example, a plant-based supplement, you read the back of the label, for the most part, they put whatever is in the protein supplement, you see what you get. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When you're taking some other kind of supplement, like one of these weight loss supplements, whatever the case is, you don't know what it's cut with.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what else is in it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these compounds, we're finding patients are having problems with those compounds.
Because the liver is a filter. I know the kidneys and the liver are a filter for
Yes.
non-nutrient chemicals, correct? Toxic
Yes.
environmental chemicals.
Yes. Absolutely.
So let's unpack this fatty liver phenomenon, because I spoke with you over a month ago and I said, hey, when we have a discussion, I want to talk about the relationship between metabolic syndrome conditions,
Yes.
how it impacts the liver. So my question to you is, you mentioned the relationship between obesity and non-alcohol fatty liver
Yeah.
disease.
Correct.
Based off my research, I know that insulin resistance being the underlying issue, because of course insulin resistance causes elevated blood glucose. And so is it that it's the glycation effect on the liver, the elevated glucose effect on the liver, that causes the liver to produce more fat? Would you elaborate on that?
So what happens is there is an abnormal accumulation of triglycerides
Right.
in the liver cells directly. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and this accumulation is part of the whole cycle that's seen, and that in essence will cause the muscles to be less sensitive to insulin and its effects.
Aha.
So then you get into this whole dog chasing its tail routine.
Mhm.
And so the easy way to intervene on that is by increasing, how do we get the muscles to increase their efficiency at using the insulin?
I can answer that question.
And that's where you come in
Yeah.
and do your thing.
I am I am honored that you and I right now, at this appointed time, are having this discussion, because we are in a position to say what I'm about to say and have a dialogue about it. I see so many Black men, African American men, who work out in the gyms,
Yes.
and they work out consistently. They're there as much as I'm there. They have central obesity.
Mm-hmm.
They have excess abdominal belly fat. I mean, they're lifting weights, they're doing a little bit of cardio, they're really working out five,
Yes.
6 days a week, but they have central obesity. They have excess abdominal belly fat. And what they don't know, unfortunately, is that central obesity or excess abdominal belly fat is actually the precursor condition. I call it. It's the first condition that paves the way for a cluster of other risk factors like insulin resistance or elevated blood glucose, elevated blood serum triglycerides, which you just spoke about, hypertension, and of course, those, now you have a cluster of risk factors. But what they don't know, a lot of Black men don't know, and I would say most Americans don't know, most Americans do not know, that excess abdominal belly fat, which is an American problem, not just an African American problem,
Right.
but African Americans have the highest body fat percentages.
Yes.
So, central obesity or excess abdominal belly fat is the first condition that actually opens the way, from my research, opens the way for the other conditions. And in that research, I learned that one of the things that can happen is a non-alcohol fatty liver.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. What When fat accumulates around the midsection, or what you call central adiposity or central obesity, that same fat can also essentially accumulate in the liver. Let me just give you an example. If I were to stick a needle into the liver of somebody with a fatty liver, we would see literally fat infiltrating into the liver cells. Okay? It literally looks like a little glob of fat in each cell. And as it gets worse and worse, we see not just more and more fat, but we see more and more inflammation. Okay? And this inflammation is the underlying theme between, like you said, all these elements of the metabolic condition, the central obesity, the hypertension, the diabetes, or the impaired fasting glucose, where your blood sugar is high, the elevated triglycerides, the low HDL, which is the good cholesterol. Okay, these are all seen together. Now, when I was coming through, when I say I was coming up, I was a medical student and a resident. We used to think of metabolic syndrome as just, like you said, hypertension, diabetes, lipids are abnormal. But in fact, we now know that fatty liver disease is now a true bona fide component of this syndrome. So they're all seen together now. Okay. And like you said, and you're right. It is the spark. It is the initial foundation for and the basis for development of fatty liver disease is that central obesity, and that's why it's important to try to reverse it. Because along with these things, the elephant in the room is what? What do these patients die of? If they're not dying,
I call it food slavery, mass food addiction.
Yes. And what kills them is heart disease, liver disease, liver cancer. And we're also seeing with this also, especially in much higher proportions in African Americans, is chronic kidney disease. Okay. Who is on dialysis? Walk into any dialysis unit. Okay, you will see the vast majority of those patients are Black patients. Okay, we have to break this cycle because why? And again, I'm not a kidney doctor, but I sort of feel like I see so much kidney disease in my patients. I say I have an honorary board certification in nephrology or kidney disease. And it's especially heartbreaking, to be honest, especially in African Americans, that we see so many of us on dialysis and so many of us on the kidney transplant list. Okay, right next to my office are the kidney transplant offices. I see those patients. And again, who do I see? I see us. I see me and you, our faces in there. Our mothers, our sisters, our cousins, our aunts and uncles. So yes, you're absolutely right. What we see is this whole family of diseases wrapped in one, and they're all seen. When you see one, you'll see the other.
Yep.
Okay.
I've done extensive research on central obesity, and you'll find a pattern where the epidemiological discussion is around excess abdominal belly fat.
Yes.
Central obesity, the adiposity, excess adipose tissue around the waist, the
Right.
abdomen. And the amazing thing is, it's the first condition that opens the way for the other condition.
Yep.
And,
absolutely.
Being a trainer, personal trainer for 22 years, of course, people don't really understand the biology that they inhabit. People don't understand. They don't understand the science. So a lot of people are under the impression that they can work out really hard and make their abdomen go down, flatten. A lot of people think they can do a lot of crunches.
Right.
Their abdomen go down. Now, once upon a time, that was true prior to the era of obesogens. prior to the era of, I give an example. If you look at video footage of the civil rights era, uh,
Yes.
if you look at footage in the 60s and 70s of large concerts with Caucasian people, and if
Mhm.
you see the video footage of African Americans protesting, you really didn't see any overweight people.
No,
They were lean,
absolutely.
but they
Absolutely.
weren't. They there were no gyms back then. People weren't working out like we work out now. Think
No,
about that. We work
no.
out way more than people in the 60s and 70s. They
Yes.
had much lower BMIs and body fat percentages, and they were not working out
Right.
in mass. We're talking about, you know, majority of the American population in the 60s and 70s, because one, gyms weren't available at that time. They weren't prevalent.
No,
It
not at
just
all.
wasn't a cultural phenomenon. Yet our body fat percentages are much higher. So I've always told people that you can do all the crunches in the world,
Mhm.
all the ab work in the world, you can do all the cardio in the world. The only thing that can get rid of central obesity, the only thing that can reverse it is increasing your plant-based food consumption at a very, very high level.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. Wait, comma, you said increasing plant-based food. I'm assuming you're also meaning reducing animal products as well, too, with that said.
absolutely.
I don't mean,
Oh no, absolutely. Because the approach I've had to take as, 22 years ago, I already had an intention and focus to get people on a plant-based diet. So I was way ahead of the curve, way ahead of the trends. But we were not in that vegan era yet.
no.
So I would always be mindful and be deliberate in the way I said things. So I would always say, we're going to focus on increasing your plant-based food consumption. And my intention was to get them to experiment with eating predominantly plant-based foods. And I was able to get many on just plant-based meal plans. Some would allow for fish, but this is prior to the modern vegan era. And
Right.
so it was very revolutionary. But yes, now, and it has been for so long, you know, a nutrient and fiber dense plant-based eating style is preventative. And this segues into a question I want to ask you. Um, Here's the question. Would these liver conditions be preventable if African Americans adopted a nutrient and fiber dense plant-based eating style?
Absolutely. Um, Fatty liver disease is directly correlated with higher intakes of animal products. And I also will say high fructose corn syrup as well, which is the
Yes.
absolute deadly killer in our diet, and it's in everything. So, like you said something, and you kind of breezed past this, but I want to focus a little bit more on it. Is that you said really nutrient dense
Mm-hmm.
foods, fiber rich foods,
Mm-hmm.
and again, what I tell my patients, I'm a simple person. That's a theme here. Okay. So, what I tell my patients is that very simply eat food as close to the way as God gave it to us.
Mm.
So, if you can go and pick a beet right out of the ground right now, dust off the dirt and eat it,
Mm-hmm.
that's the best way to eat, or as close to that as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and then people give me these funny looks and say, well, first of all, I always start off by telling my patients that what I'm telling you right now, you probably have never ever heard before from other doctors, one. And number two, you probably will not hear this from another physician. Okay. And I go back and ask patients 6 months, 12 months later and say, have you ever heard what I've told you before from other doctors? Most people say no, which doesn't surprise me. Okay. So that right there sets the stage for people to think that I'm not just a quack and telling them some nonsense. Okay. I warn them.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm telling you is new. And like you, I've done my research.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't learn this stuff in medical school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In 4 years of medical school, we spent maybe an hour or two on nutrition. 4 years of medical school, an hour or two on nutrition. Now, with that said, there is a growing field
Mm-hmm.
of interest. There are more and more societies looking at this with interest in this because they know the obvious benefits of this. Okay. There are now board certifications
Mm-hmm.
in doctors that will specialize in these kinds of conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. More and more doctors are interested and engaged in this. So it's making my job easier and making your job easier of doing what? Eliminating chronic diseases. You know, I have to jump into this and just say that the basic principles of what I try to teach patients is that you're trying to put money into the savings account. You're trying to save for a rainy day. So God forbid something comes along and insults you or takes the money out of your bank account. You have a reserve. Okay. If I could take a quick little sidebar, if you don't mind, and we're talking about this 2020 you mentioned earlier. It's been a crazy year.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, we're in this pandemic right now of this COVID-19 pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been tragic. And we've seen a lot of deaths in this country, around the world, and we'll see a lot more. And I've been seeing some of the stories around the country, different news feeds and different things I've been seeing. And they'll say, you know, a 44-year-old man with otherwise no medical problems. And I'll see a picture of that young man who is 44 years old with, quote, no other medical problems. But the person, I can see very, very clearly on the picture that the person is obese.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if it's just a headshot or if it's just sort of an upper torso shot, that you can see the obesity is there, you know, the rest of the body, particularly there will be central obesity.
Yep.
So I have to respectfully and gently argue and say that the person does in fact have an underlying
That's right.
other chronic medical condition or risk factor.
That's
okay.
Right.
So, you know, unfortunately, folks that have, like you're pointing out, the central obesity, it is a medical condition. Okay. It's not a judgment on your looks. It's not a judgment on your physique of how you look in a bathing suit or whatever. It's not a judgment. I'm talking purely from a medical science perspective. Okay. Because at the end of the day, the question is, will you be able to absorb that insult that comes your way? Okay. If you, God forbid, are infected with COVID, how will your body be able to sustain that massive, massive insult? The surge of cytokines, the surge of inflammatory process. If your body is already in an inflamed state, which obesity is an inflamed state.
That's right.
It's particularly central obesity. You're just baseline inflamed. Okay, your body's simply very just inflamed on the insides. Okay, activated.
Yeah. That's right.
And you throw another insult at it.
Viral.
There's a less likely chance that you will survive and survive successfully that insult. So I'm sorry to digress, but I felt like it was just
powerful.
I just had to timing of this.
That was not even a digression. That's called connecting the dots.
Yes.
That's called helping people make connections between one thing going on in their biology as a pre-existing condition, and now there's another environmental threat.
Yes.
Now, here's an important question. The most vulnerable population segments, regardless whether in the US or elsewhere, are folks with pre-existing conditions, medical conditions, obesity being part of that, heart disease, diabetes.
Right.
What role does the liver play in immune response?
Well, that's the easiest question I've had to answer all day. Your immune response comes from the liver directly, okay? Meaning somebody who has so the liver makes proteins.
That's right.
Okay? So the immune system are a bunch of proteins that go and attack bacteria, they attack viruses, they attack fungi or funguses, whatever the case is. Okay.
IgA.
So, absolutely.
Globulin A.
These are all come from the liver. So somebody with a liver problem at baseline is already considered to be immunocompromised, meaning they have a weakened immune system. Okay, so my 60-year-old patient with cirrhosis, okay, if he or she gets admitted to the hospital with run-of-the-mill pneumonia or heart attack, whatever the case is, okay, or let's just take with pneumonia because it is a bacterial infection of the lungs. Their chances of surviving are much less than somebody is compared to with a normal liver. This is hard and fast data. This is not my opinion. This is fact. Okay, so the liver is directly responsible for your immune system. They make all the inflammatory cells. The immune system comes from the liver, essentially.
So just to tie it all in, when there is central obesity or excess abdominal belly fat on a woman's body or a man's body,
yes,
in general, what condition is the liver in when there's visible with eyesight where you can see excess abdominal belly fat on a young person's body, an adult's body, an older person's body? What state in general is the liver in when someone has excess abdominal belly fat in general?
So in general, and speaking in plain, simple English terms, the liver is generally inflamed, but it's inflamed abnormally, and therefore, secondarily, some of its functions can become impaired. And you're not able to fight off infections as you would if you had a normal liver, quite simply.
Okay, folks. So the reason why I asked the question is so the audience can make the connection between excess fat or obesity, specifically excess abdominal belly fat, central obesity, liver function, and how the liver, according to Dr. Zamor, that the immune system comes out of the liver because the liver produces or makes proteins that are the basis of our healthy immune response. Is that a good way to explain it?
Exactly.
So that's why I do the work I do with such passion. And you know what's interesting? The more you know, the more zeal, the more passion you have. But when you're dealing with a population that is not aware of the same information, there's less of an urgency. So you have people who, like you said, obesity and overweight is a medical condition. And even Dr. Furman says that. He says that Dr. Furman has been saying this a lot, that if you're overweight or obese, you are not healthy.
Correct.
Most medical doctors are not saying that. a lot of people are overweight with central obesity and some obese, but their numbers may not be bad, like their blood pressure numbers or their triglyceride numbers. Typically, though, what I found being a coach, if someone has excess abdominal belly fat, usually at least one of them numbers is elevated. But there are
Yes.
cases where I've had folks say, my numbers are good.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a dangerous message. And I always tell them, well, they're okay for now.
Right. Right.
So let me ask you another question. This is a really insightful, very powerful discussion. How does a diet high in animal product consumption impact the liver?
Wow. So well, first of all, we know that, that the human body really wasn't um, designed to live on the diet that we're now taking in now, especially here in America, which is a diet high in animal fats and also the processed foods, the processed animal products, which are 10 times worse than just animal products. So we know that directly we're seeing a direct increase in these triglycerides, or basically these fat particles in the liver. Okay. Secondarily, what we're seeing in patients that have, and again, I speak of the liver, but I feel like I'm a global person. I have to speak, I can't ignore the rest of the body because it's all connected.
The system.
It's a system. And when one piece of the system fails, the rest of the system fails. So if somebody has, for example, a bad heart, okay, then I can't do the work that I have to do on them because there's a roadblock to me. So again, I look at it as all being connected. But for example, when we see diets that are higher in plant-based, a high plant-based diet, we're seeing certain genes turned on. And we're seeing these same genes turned off when they're on high animal product diets. Okay, so directly and indirectly, we're seeing effects in the liver and also the whole entire body. So I feel comfortable enough saying that again, we're seeing this higher accumulation of the triglycerides in the liver cells. We're also seeing a higher concentration of these saturated fats that can give you more problems, again, with gallstones or gallbladder disease, which is directly related to the liver because the liver and bile comes from liver. It's made in the liver and stored in the gallbladder. So again, this has a direct correlation on that. I had a patient I saw just last week, and for example, and the woman had her gallbladder removed. So she noticed that when she ate fatty foods, that that she had more trouble with diarrhea and gas in her abdomen. And sometime months ago, I seen her and I said, well, you should really consider, especially you. Again, I asked her, had you heard this before from anyone else about a plant-based diet? She said, of course. She said no. So I'm about to tell you something that's going to be mind-blowing and shocking, but true. She took a plant-based diet approach. Her symptoms went away. Okay? She saw an immediate impact. So that's my field. That's my area, is the liver and gallbladder and intestines. Okay, we saw an immediate impact on her symptoms. Less diarrhea, less gas, less bloating when she switched to a plant-based diet. Okay. And I'm sorry, I should say a primarily plant-based diet. I know she's not a full vegan, but she did see a marked improvement in those symptoms. So just to answer that question, as an example of something that's fresh in my head of a patient.
And that's really good. That's a good anecdotal, very insightful anecdotal, a great story. I wanted to ask you just to reiterate, because, of course, right now, my focus is on this upcoming public health demonstration encouraging all African Americans to adopt the plant based eating style. And it's called the Plant Based Day Pledge. My question is just for the audience, as a physician, what are the most common liver conditions that you see in African American patients specifically? Just to read.
So I see, well, being a liver doctor, I see, of course, a lot of alcoholic liver disease. So liver disease related to alcohol, hepatitis C, fatty liver disease. And I also see a fair amount of other metabolic syndromes that are sort of genetic syndromes, like what's called autoimmune hepatitis, which we see primarily in women, an overactive immune system that can be partially related to your genes, what you got from your parents, but we're also understanding that environment,
Facts. Epigenetics.
epigenetics play a role in it. So there's nature and nurture.
That's
with
right.
certain conditions that I see, and I can tell you that we're lacking a lot of the the science to say that thousands and thousands of people have this condition. What we're seeing is small case series. Okay, it's very difficult to put together large sets of data, especially in African American patients, because of the history of this country and the legacy of the Tuskegee experiment, for example, which took place just a few years ago. It ended in 1972, was the last year of that. So we tend to
Not trust.
there's a distrust in the medical community.
Yeah.
I don't discredit that. I acknowledge that and say, yes. I mean, this took place before I was born, but doctors took place in this experiment. It happened in this country, right here on our hallowed grounds. Okay, so
for decades.
Yes, absolutely. So because of that, we're missing a lot of. We lack a lot of African Americans to participate in many clinical trials. Okay, now go back to what I said earlier. Okay, about we have all that what you said earlier. As a matter of fact, we have all these chronic conditions: high blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol problems, lipid problems. Okay, guess what? All these medications that African American patients take for these conditions. Well, guess what? The large majority of these medications were clinically tested in these clinical trials in white patients, not African American patients. That is the irony here. That is the dichotomy here that we're seeing. All these patients on these medications, yet we know that a lot of these medications, we know that they're safe and effective for the most part, but they weren't tested in those 10,000 patients that you name it, your blood pressure medicine. Okay, you name anyone, losartan or amlodipine, whatever. The vast majority, if you break down those studies and you see, they break it down, the percentage of white patients, black patients, Hispanic, Asians, and so forth. The majority of medications were tested in white males. Okay, so that's the paradox that we have. Okay, so getting back to your question, we can do away with all these medications. Okay, by simply just introducing the idea of a plant-based diet in our patients. We can get rid of, I tell patients, show me the list of medications, or better yet, bring the medications to me. I can get rid of most all these medications by having you eat the way God, by the foods God gave us. Okay, we're searching for these other things. You pick up a bag of Doritos or nacho or Cheetos or something. Read the ingredients, half of which you can't pronounce. I can't pronounce and you can't pronounce. Pick up an apple and eat it. Can you pronounce apple? Yes. Can you pronounce half of the chemicals that's in these processed foods that we're eating? No.
And those chemicals, each ingredient has a function
Yes.
in God's biology, and a function that adversely affects the liver, because the liver has to filter out non-nutrient chemicals that are man-made versus God-made chemicals like antioxidants,
Right.
phytochemicals, which are the color pigments we see in plant-based foods, and
Right.
the vitamins, the minerals, the plant sterols, the enzymes. All that God-made stuff has a beneficial impact on our liver, the immune system, our blood. You know, the whole system flourishes.
Yes. And I will go, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I will go and say is that these changes that happens with these chemicals that you talk about, these phytonutrients, these sterols, it's almost immediate, the impact.
Yes.
Okay. Even though you may not see the immediate change, these chemical changes are happening on a cellular level almost immediately.
Within hours.
Within hours.
Facts.
These genes are getting turned on and off within hours.
Facts.
That's facts. That's not my opinion. That's facts. Okay. Yep. And so these are changes that happen immediately. Okay. Yep. Diabetes. Okay. We have ample evidence to show that we can reverse diabetes with a plant-based diet. Okay. Diabetes disproportionately affects African Americans at alarming rates. And it's happening in younger people. We're seeing it in teenagers, which we didn't see before. We're now seeing it in 10-year-olds. Okay. So like you, I'm equally as passionate. The more I learn, like you said something very poignant earlier, the more you learn about it. And so I tried not to just lecture to people. I try to empower my patients. You read for yourself, and I'll point them to as much information as I possibly can. YouTube videos, your lectures from Dr. Milton Mills, for example, who's a world-renowned cardiologist. I was on the movie What the Health, for example. Okay, just giving folks bits and pieces so they can see for themselves the science for themselves. So they'll believe it. Once folks believe it, once folks can understand it, then they'll believe it. It's easier to convince people once they understand why we're doing what we're doing, why we're saying what we're saying.
It's an emergent. If you look at the data, and if you being up close and personal as a physician, looking at livers, looking at the condition of people's livers, it's an emergency, but there's no alarm that has gone off.
There's no alarm.
This is the alarm right here. This
yes.
This is one of the alarms.
God willing, I hope we've sounded the alarms for many to hear.
This is part of it, because without the information, without the insight, people aren't making the connection. Now, biologically, their biology is dealing with the symptoms. They're at the different varying levels of suffering.
Right.
You know, the body is a remarkable feedback. You know, you talk about the nervous system feedback, letting you know something's wrong with the liver, something's being done to the brain. The nervous system is telling you what's going on based off sensations.
Yes.
And if there's mild pain, moderate pain, or severe pain, the nervous system lets you know if there's no sensation, everything is cool.
Right.
But people are experiencing feedback that indicates there's quite a few different things wrong in their system as a whole. But the alarm has not gone off, and African American people are being more impacted by metabolic syndrome conditions.
Yes.
And people don't even know that just the data shows that getting back to central obesity, excess abdominal belly fat, and its relationship to increasing your cancer risk.
Oh, yes. We haven't even talked about the C word. We haven't even gotten to the C word yet, the cancer word.
Strokes, heart disease, cancer. We acknowledged, we haven't acknowledged or mentioned PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome incidence
Yes.
on the rise as a result of metabolic syndrome.
In our Black women, absolutely. Huge, epidemic proportions.
Uterine fibroids has been the tradition. Now it's polycystic ovary syndrome on the rise.
We haven't even mentioned the other C word that gets people excited. Breast cancer. I mean, again, we could go on for a whole, it gets me excited to talk about these things, okay? A quick 1 minute vignette. I saw a patient, an African-American woman who had fatty liver disease, okay? And she also had breast cancer a few years back, okay? You can guess what is the background, what is the foundation for her problems? Obesity. She had central obesity, okay? She came to me for fatty liver disease, okay? And I asked her, I said, have you ever heard from another physician, your cancer doctors, that there's a direct correlation with breast cancer and obesity? No. Have you ever heard of, now she was treated and cured for her breast cancer, had she ever heard about the breast cancer recurrence with obesity? She said, no. I was shocked, taken aback. I said, I can have you free of doctors for the rest of your life with one simple intervention, okay? A plant-based diet that would fix your obesity, that would improve your fatty liver, and would also reduce your breast cancer incidence, the chance of you having recurrence of your breast cancer. I told her exactly that. I tried to sound the alarm in her.
People, part of the problem is we can't see our liver. We
Right.
can't see, if it would be neat, like if God, I mean, medicine provides the insight. The imaging technology provides the insight where you can get a peek inside of the body. Functional, what is it called? Functional imagery.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
The reality of it is, if people could actually see what was going on in their blood, if people could see the C-reactive proteins, the bad proteins made as a result of the calorie-rich and processed food that they were consuming, if people could see when they eat a meal that is an animal product-based meal, meats, including fish,
Right.
if they could see the bad proteins made, and I'm being specific when I say bad proteins, I'm talking about C-reactive protein, because genes make proteins. And when Americans, when people, period, when human beings are consuming calorie-rich and processed foods and consuming animal product-based foods, genes make proteins called C-reactive proteins.
Mm-hmm.
And in medicine, if they check your blood and they see a CRP number above 1, you've got some serious problems that are either happening or about to happen.
About to happen. Right. Right. It's predictive.
That's right.
It's predictive, like you said.
Conversely, consuming nutrient and micronutrient and fiber dense plant-based foods causes the genes to make good proteins. Is that so simple?
It's real simple. It's amazing. And it's so simple that it's amazing. It's just that simple. Like you said, like I said earlier, certain genes are turned on and certain genes are turned off. And the good genes are turned on with that plant-based diet, with all these chemicals that God gave us, not the ones that God did not give us. That's simple.
And people, it's important to make that distinction. There's man-made chemicals.
Yes.
And there's God-made chemicals. God-made chemicals are antioxidants that you find in plant-based foods. God-made chemicals are the color pigments that when you look at a mango, blueberries, cherries, all those colors are called phytonutrients or phytochemicals. Those are God-made chemicals. Nutrients are chemicals.
Right, right.
Yellow dye number 5 is a man-made chemical.
Right.
And if you ingest that particular color or chemical, it's going to activate and turn on genes that you don't want turned on, called like oncogenes.
Right.
And we don't want the oncogenes to make proteins.
We do not, ever.
But reactions are always occurring. Whenever eating actions create reactions, and reactions produce measurable results in our physiology. It's a simple action, reaction, results. I teach every single customer that pattern: action, reaction, results. If you know that, then you want to eat deliberately. Once those 3 words, actions, reactions, results. Now you got your power back because you're in control of the reactions and the results by the eating actions. Simple.
Absolutely. Just to quote, I believe it was Elijah Muhammad who said, you have to eat to live, not live to eat. Be purposeful. That's all. I think that's a simple thing that most of us are not purposeful.
Facts. We're not.
We're not.
That's part of the problem. People say they want to be healthy. See, the good thing about what we do, you interact with people every day. I interact with people every day. Everybody talks a good game. People say, I just want to be healthy. Here's the reality. When you eat micronutrient, and fiber-dense plant-based foods, you're eating from an awareness. You're eating with a purpose. What's the purpose? Health success. Metabolic health equals health success. If you're not eating to support your cells and genes, you are not really concerned about being healthy. It's a meal by meal situation. It's a numbers game.
Right, right. Simple.
It's math, man.
It's math.
When I do have vegan ice cream or popcorn, I minimize the amount of times that occurs. I maximize the amount of meals that are micronutrient and fiber dense. So numbers wise, all of my intake is alive, full of enzymes. And so when I do have a processed food item, it don't even have a chance because the next meal I'm going to have is a kale salad, a big salad. I got it down to where even if I have popcorn, I know what to eat right afterwards to offset the reaction.
Now, with that said, I'm sure, there's popcorn and there's popcorn, for example.
Yeah.
There's microwave popcorn, which we throw in, zap it real quick. That's if you read the labels, it's full of what? Cancer-causing agents.
Yep.
But if we take some kernels of corn, okay, you can buy these like the old school popcorn kernels, put them in a big heavy pot with some healthier oils that can take the high heat. Put one kernel in, wait till it pops, then you pour your rest of the amount in there, cover it up. You have popcorn. Most folks don't make popcorn like this.
That's right.
Okay,
I buy mine. I buy organic, non-GMO popcorn.
Well, okay, even better. Yes. Yeah.
But the point being, so one of the things that hadn't been discussed, and then I have a couple more questions. I call it food slavery. And when I say food slavery, that's a term that God gave to me directly with a definition, and it's backed by research. Food slavery is the economic and nutritional consumption of calorie-rich and processed foods that are addictive and responsible for our epidemics of obesity, chronic diseases, and premature death. That's food slavery. Food slavery is food addiction at scale on a mass level. So if you really look at, well, why are we obese? Why are we dying from heart attacks? Why are the epidemiologists forecasting that type 2 diabetes is going to surpass heart disease? Food slavery. People don't realize that they are addicted to foods that were engineered to keep them coming back for more. 50 USDA data, fall of 2019, indicates that the average American derives or gets about 57% of their calories from highly processed foods. And then the plant-based category accounts for 14%. But potatoes in that category, most of the potatoes consumed in America are French fries. So really, in terms of unprocessed plant-based foods, Americans are only really getting probably about 6% of their calories from natural, unprocessed, micronutrient and fiber-dense plant-based foods, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, whole grains. So it makes sense. It makes sense. It explains. See, the diseases in medicine. Medicine makes it seem like cancer is the issue, heart disease is the issue, inflammation is the issue. If you really look at it, inflammation is a protective response.
Right.
People don't understand. Medicine, unfortunately, has made it seem like chronic inflammation is the problem. Chronic inflammation is a response to an assault.
Right. Nobody talks about that part.
No.
Why is there chronic inflammation?
Right.
Why is there chronic inflammation? That's the question.
Versus pinning inflammation versus medically criminalizing chronic inflammation as the problem. An inflammatory response, without that, we couldn't even remain alive. Just imagine if there was no inflammatory response and we drank soda and we did this and that and we just died. See? Even the fat accumulating in the liver, even the fat accumulating over the muscle cell, preventing insulin, causing insulin sensitivity. Even that's a response designed in the midst of the assault, meaning calorie-rich and processed foods with artificial colors and all this sugar, and the body's doing its best to keep us alive.
but at a toll, at a big price.
Talking about the grace, think about the grace. We don't die from violating the body right away.
No.
A lot of grace.
It's a slow, painful death.
Yeah. We're going to wrap it up, but I do have two last questions.
Please.
One question is, and you could probably answer this pretty quickly. If you look back a decade or more, what can you tell us about the liver health history of African Americans as it pertains to the incidences of chronic liver disease? Has it gone up? Has it stabilized? Numbers wise, looking back, tell us a little bit about the liver health history of African Americans pertaining to the incidences of chronic liver disease.
Definitely has gone up over the last 10 years. I've seen that. I can just recall what I'm seeing now over what I've seen 10 years ago when I first started in practice. Definite increase in the number of African Americans that I'm seeing, especially with certain diseases, especially with diseases like fatty liver disease or this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Definitely on the rise. Thankfully, certain diseases, due to some research and advances in science, we're seeing a decline. Primarily hepatitis C, we're seeing a big decline. And I was part of some of the studies that where we looked at that, and we actually tried to engage African American patients at a higher rate. And we did, and because of the outreach and because of the word in the street, and because of, to quote you, the alarms that were rung, we were able to get a handle on certain things like hepatitis C. But we're drastically behind with diseases such as fatty liver disease, some of the autoimmune diseases that we're seeing are on the rise, things of that nature.
Well said. And also, I want to make sure I cover the last few questions before we wrap it up. So, do you believe that African Americans can create a new health story in the next decade by adopting a plant-based eating style?
No question. No question about it. And it just seems to me that, you know, when I go to some of the plant-based restaurants that I go to, I'm seeing more and more African Americans there.
Yeah.
And that's encouraging.
Yeah.
This past summer, you know, with some of the plant-based festivals that were happening, I'm actually encouraged, to be quite honest. I'm excited and encouraged for the future ahead. I know we still have many barriers to overcome, primarily the barriers in our heads. But I definitely think it's possible, and I see it becoming a reality.
Yeah, I do too.
I do.
I live in that vision, and that's why I do the work that I do.
Indeed.
I literally live in that vision. And this was so interesting. I was looking at some data from the CDC the other night, and it brought me to tears. To be quite frank and honest, I was looking at I'm preparing for a webinar, and I was looking at all the data, like causes of death data, specifically with African Americans. So I went from heart disease to liver disease to, and man, I just started bawling. I'm not gonna lie, tears came to my eyes because not only was I looking at the data, I can see it.
Yeah.
In the people I relate to, I can see it.
Yes.
I'm observing this week by week in the people that enroll in my plant-based loser challenge. Black men and women have type 2 diabetes, and they all have central obesity.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
so I'm seeing it. I'm relating to people. And so a lot of work needs to be done. And in closing, I have one question because, you know, God is amazing. And I always say, man, we're all here by design. We're born with a purpose and mission. And I know part of what God has revealed to me is for there to be a public health demonstration that encourages all African Americans to adopt a plant-based eating style. In light of that, as a physician, would you recommend that all African Americans pursuing health success take the plant-based day pledge, which is up and coming?
Absolutely, 100%, without any question, without wavering. I would support this, uh, and I would just hope that this would be a stepping stone to for many folks that are not aware of a plant-based diet or have never been exposed to it. They have no knowledge of it. For this is this could be an eye-opening experience for many. I strongly believe that.
It's in the works, and I will definitely be contacting you. I'm in the process of finalizing to get the pages up, and it's going to offer meal plans and a lot of the things. You people don't know our backstory, but you became a customer of mine,
Yes, yes,
Christian Performance Coaching, and you wound up signing your sister up. And
yes,
that was like my first online iteration. And I think you've been able to benefit from the metabolic based meal plans I have. And you've seen a lot of the
absolutely,
testimonies over time. Um,
absolutely.
but things evolve, and the plant based loser challenge is remarkable. I had a young lady sign up last night for it. So people are enrolling in that. But the plant based day pledge is this is a public health demonstration. This is huge. This is, God revealed this to me to affect society, to inspire 1 million African Americans to adopt a plant based eating style. Now, you may say, well, why just a day? All change. Any time you want to eat better, any time you want to adopt better practices, better habits, starts in a day. So a day can be a turning point, especially when they're on the meal plans I've developed, because when people get on a well balanced, micronutrient and fiber dense plant based meal plan for one day, I've seen folks lose their addictive hunger.
Hmm.
I've seen food addiction, the cravings that are part of that, disappear in one day on my meal plan. I've seen people drop 1 to 2 pounds of fat in a day. I've had people tell me that their energy goes up. I've had people tell me that when it's time to eat my next meal, I'm not hungry. And I said, yeah, because you can go longer without eating. So I want to inspire. God has given me a vision to help 1 million African Americans adopt a plant based eating style for a day. And then this community, the upcoming Plant Based Day pledge community, will support African Americans in sustaining it long term. And I even want to, partner with you and other physicians so we can do a study. Speaking of studies, because it's been revealed to me many people are going to get on board. Many people are going to do this plant-based day pledge, and they will create an opportunity in collaboration with physicians where we can do a study, and observe how African Americans biologies are being shifted towards the better, how metabolic syndrome conditions start disappearing, and we move people towards metabolic health.
Yes,
And so with that, I'll need collaborations with you and other physicians, because this has to happen. We the only way that African Americans are going to have a shot at health success is by way of a plant-based eating style done the proper way.
no
Um,
question.
Dr. Zamor, I thank you for your time. I thank you for sharing all of your medical knowledge, your insights, the stories. And last question, let the audience know, how long have you been plant-based?
I've been plant-based for, I think it's close to about 3 years now. Prior to that, I ate pretty clean, to be honest with you. And of course, every once in a while, we all like to cheat with some quick bites here and there of some processed food. I think for me now, it's very, very, very rarely that I'll have the popcorn or the whatever. But I've been plant-based for about 3 years now. Primarily vegetarian for about 5 years or so. Prior to that, I was eating mostly just occasional fish. And once I Yeah, I talked about that.
Yeah.
And once I understood the body's true metabolic needs, of course, what do you hear all the time? Well, how do you get enough protein on a plant-based diet? It's very easy, as a matter of fact. It's not hard at all.
Every meal is
Absolutely. And again, thank you for the work that you do and inspiring people like myself. I would consider myself to be an ambassador to this lifestyle, to this approach. It's opened up doors for me. I've made connections with different people. I hope to this just explodes, and it's not just. I hope this epidemic explodes. The epidemic about us tackling this epidemic needs to explode because, again, like you said, premature. What are we trying to get at here? It's real simple: premature death, premature disease, premature suffering. Let's get to folks before they're suffering and make an intervention there.
That's the whole point of my work, to prevent further African American human suffering and further American human suffering.
Absolutely.
As a result of food slavery, because all Americans are being taken out early. I always say we're all going to get to the cemetery, but why eat and arrive there early? Why eat so that you arrive early? Now, I have a joke that, I intend to arrive late. And that's the one experience I'm being late to. The coroner, he's going to be like, man, we don't went from me. Say, you've been around since my great granddad. We've been waiting. Yeah, man, I got a lot to do.
Right.
So, Dr. Zamor, I thank you. Next time I'm contacting you, there's a summit that's in the works around the whole plant-based day project. And you will definitely be one of the medical doctors that I include in the plant-based day.
I'm excited.
Summit. So thank you again for your time. Thanks for dropping knowledge. Thanks for being one of a select few of special plant-based physicians who actually care about people and care about helping people achieve health success, which is metabolic health, which is what I call biological wealth. And it's so important that we move all Americans, especially African Americans, out of what I call a state of biological poverty. Indeed. Thank you so much, Dr. Zamor.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate that as well.
And if you need anything, you know who to call. I've got a plant-based, intermittent fasting plan that's about to be released.
Okay, excellent.
It's going to be for people with conditions, the diabetes. So I'm learning a lot about the intermittent fasting.
Yes.
So much for your time. God bless you and the family.
Same to you, brother.
Stay plant strong.
Be well. And again, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. We'll talk. Thank you.
We'll do. Take care.
Oh, yeah. So, folks, thank you for participating. I see there are some comments. Thank you very much for watching this live broadcast. As you can tell, I know you've learned a lot. I know you've received a lot of value. I know you've gained a lot of insight. We talked about a lot of different things. And please share this with others so that they can benefit, so that they can learn. And we just had one of the plant-based physicians in America comment on the necessity of African Americans to adopt a plant-based eating style. As I mentioned, the Plant-Based Day Pledge is coming. I'm putting the finishing touches on the page. There will be a Plant-Based Day Pledge community launching any day now. And I'm going to invite all African Americans. I'm encouraging you to adopt the plant-based eating style because achieving health success depends upon it. And it's time. It's time. It's time. It's time. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Please share this with others so that they can be inspired, uplifted, and learn what to do next. Take care. I love you. God bless you. And God's biology deserves better.